Before anyone steps through your door, something far more subtle arrives first. Energy. It doesn't wait for your welcome mat or notice your paint color. It senses everything. The shape of your garden beds, the slope of your path, the texture of your pots, the way a single leaf leans toward the light. Your front entrance isn't just a design feature, it's a dialogue. And long before you greet opportunity at the door, your landscape either opens the gate or closes it. In Feng Shui, this space is known as the Ming Tong, or Bright Hall. It is the area that receives life force from the universe, vital qi that circulates towards you, not randomly, but through rhythm, shape, and intention. Most people believe their fortune begins with what's inside their home, the furniture, the decor, the vision board in the bedroom. But Feng Shui teaches us something quieter and more powerful, that true transformation begins before the threshold. It begins outside where the qi has not yet arrived, but is already deciding whether it wants to. Think of your front of house space not as a buffer, but as a magnet. Every object, every plant, every color placed here is not passive. It is participating in a negotiation between your space and the greater flow of the world. And in that negotiation, plants play a vital role. Not all greenery is equal. Some attract opportunity like bees to blossom. Others unintentionally block energy or confuse it. But the right plants, chosen not for beauty alone, but for energetic resonance, can anchor your home in grounded prosperity. They don't just sit in pots. They hold the gate open. They soften chaos. They say to the future, you are welcome here. In today's episode, we're not going to tell you which flowers look best with your siding. We're going to walk through 5 of the most powerful plants you can place at the front of your home, each one selected for its energetic message, its elemental correspondence, and its role in shaping the very first impression your home sends into the world. These are the plants that greet visitors, soothe the weary, shield the chaotic, and nourish the path of fortune itself. You'll learn why citrus trees are more than fruit bearers, why bamboo planted in the wrong place can scatter luck, and why even the smallest pot of rosemary can become a ritual in clarity. And we won't stop at listing plants. We'll guide you through placement strategy, energetic mistakes to avoid, and simple enhancements that can turn your front entrance from a passive walkway into an active field of invitation. Because in Feng Shui, you don't just decorate, you direct. So before we take that first step, I'd like to ask something of you. If this video already brings you a breath of clarity, if something in this framing helps you see your home with new eyes, share it. Send it to a friend moving into a new place, or someone who's quietly rebuilding their foundation after a life shift. And subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We're approaching 2,000 subscribers, and every comment, every click, every voice adds momentum to this movement toward homes that don't just hold stuff, but hold energy with care. Now, let's begin right where change always starts, a few feet before the front door, where the future pauses to ask, is this home ready to receive? The 5 best Feng Shui plants for the front of your house. Plant 1, citrus trees, magnetic prosperity and active flow. Of all the plants that stand in front of a home, citrus trees are among the most symbolically rich and energetically potent in Feng Shui. These trees do not simply beautify a space, they transmit signals of vitality, magnetism, and ripened fortune. Their round golden fruits resemble ancient Chinese coins, and in many traditional households, oranges and kumquats were considered the very scent of abundance. Their fragrance, light and bright, stirs the surrounding qi, gently waking the energy field at your doorstep. Unlike harsher forms of yang activation such as aggressive lighting or wind chimes, the citrus tree invites momentum with grace. It signals that the household is not only open to wealth, but prepared to hold it in a way that is fruitful, visible, and alive. In terms of placement, citrus trees are most effective when they create symmetrical anchoring. Two trees, one on each side of the main entrance, mirror each other and symbolically protect the energy flow, ensuring balance as fortune enters. If you do not have a symmetrical layout, placing a single citrus tree in the front yard, particularly in the southeast corner, associated with wealth in the traditional Bagua map, can be equally powerful. Visibility is essential. A citrus tree tucked into obscurity won't send the same message. Prosperity responds not just to intention, but to clarity. Citrus trees are deeply yang in energy. They are activators. They don't just sit passively, they push energy outward, invigorate stale zones, and keep the energy cycle dynamic. This makes them especially useful in homes where energy at the entrance has felt sluggish, flat, or confused. When placed correctly, they provide a kind of natural invitation, encouraging opportunity to pause, admire, and then enter. They also subtly remind guests and household members alike that joy, warmth, and generosity are values rooted at this threshold. However, their power also comes with responsibility. A neglected citrus tree is one of the clearest symbols of blocked or dwindling fortune. When the leaves dry, the branches thin, or the fruit stops appearing, the energy begins to echo stagnation rather than growth. A dry, barren tree at the entrance is not just a missed opportunity. It can actively repel good luck. This isn't superstition. It's the energetic equivalent of a wilted handshake or a front porch light that flickers with fatigue. The energy that arrives reads that signal long before it feels the warmth inside the home. That's why tending your citrus tree is not gardening, it's energetic maintenance. To enhance the impact of a citrus tree even further, consider surrounding the base with intentional symbolism. Smooth, polished stones in golden, amber, or earthy tones stabilize the root zone while reflecting the richness of the fruit above. A red ribbon tied loosely around the base, or a small red ceramic element nestled among the roots, adds fire energy to the earth-wood dynamic, intensifying attraction without overstimulation. These enhancements don't have to be elaborate. They only need to be intentional. The beauty of citrus trees is their accessibility. They do not require elaborate rituals or rare knowledge. What they ask for is care, visibility, and presence. They respond to consistent attention, not micromanagement, but gentle stewardship. Like fortune itself, they reward clarity, rhythm, and space to breathe. If your front door currently lacks joy, if your entrance feels like a place people pass through rather than a space where energy gathers, a citrus tree may be the simplest and most profound first step. It tells the world that your household is ready, not just to receive, but to share, to brighten, and to bear fruit. Because in Feng Shui, fruit is never just food. It is the manifestation of seeds tended, time-honored, and roots that have done their quiet work underground. In the quiet rhythm of citrus growth, you're reminded that prosperity doesn't shout. It shows up with sweetness, roundness, and balance. Let your citrus tree become the symbol of that truth, not in theory, but in soil, scent, and subtle radiance at the very gateway to your life. Plant 2. Boxwood, guardians of stability. Boxwood, along with other compact evergreens, plays a unique role in the energetic architecture of a Feng Shui-informed home. It does not attract fortune in the way a flowering plant might, nor does it stir movement like a citrus tree. Its function is quieter, subtler, but no less essential. It is the energetic gatekeeper, holding space, setting tone, and absorbing friction before it crosses the boundary of the home. Boxwoods represent durability, not just physically in their dense evergreen form, but energetically in their ability to buffer and slow chaotic movement. This makes them especially powerful when your house faces a fast-moving street, a sharp corner, or is exposed to environments with a lot of energetic noise, be it traffic, commercial buildings, or constant motion from the outside world. In Feng Shui, rushing qi, known as sha qi, is not good fortune. It is disruptive, like wind that blows so hard it topples the lantern before it can light the path. Rushing qi scatters attention, destabilizes focus, and makes it difficult for opportunity to land within a household. Boxwood's compact growth pattern naturally slows this energy. When placed just outside the gates or along the path before the front door, these shrubs serve as stabilizing filters. They don't block the qi, they temper it. They reshape its speed and rhythm like stones slowing a stream. In this way, boxwoods provide the transition from outer world to inner calm. They ensure that the energy entering your home has softened, quieted, and aligned before crossing the threshold. It is not by accident that many traditional homes, temples, and noble estates planted evergreens along their main entranceways. In Feng Shui, evergreens symbolize continuity. Their leaves do not fall away with seasons. Their energy is not conditional. They hold the same grounded vibration year-round, echoing the value of loyalty, patience, and slow, deliberate security. Boxwoods in particular, with their finely textured, tightly held leaves, are often used in symmetrical pairs, bookending paths, gates, or entrances not as obstacles, but as gentle sentinels. Their role is not to protect with severity, but to calm the atmosphere, to offer subtle psychic order to the entry journey. Placement matters. These plants should never feel accidental, like leftover landscaping. When placed just outside the front gate, they signal preparation. When flanking the walkway that leads to the door, they serve as energetic buffers, quietly inviting guests and fortune alike to decelerate, to take in the space, to arrive consciously. The energy function of a boxwood is akin to that of a vestibule in classical architecture. It creates pause. And in Feng Shui, pause is power. It creates a break between external chaos and internal stillness. It gives you space to receive with intention. One of the few mistakes people make with these plants is pruning them too harshly or shaping them into aggressive, angular forms. Avoid topiary that turns circular flow into harsh arrows. In Feng Shui, shapes are not only aesthetic, they are energetic. Points cut qi, rounds invite it to settle. Keep the form soft, rounded, and balanced on both sides of the path to create energetic symmetry. If the plant begins to thin or brown, that's a sign that the external overwhelm is starting to penetrate. Tend the plant not just for appearance, but for energetic integrity. To enhance the stabilizing effect of boxwoods, consider lighting the path between them. Soft, warm ground lights placed near the roots or along the walkway not only provide nighttime safety, they activate the fire element, which balances the earthiness of the plant. Fire energy also signals presence, hospitality, and illumination. This isn't about dramatic lighting, it's about intention. A low, steady glow beneath the foliage creates both visual calm and energetic warmth. Alternatively, place your boxwoods in matching ceramic or stone planters on either side of a path. This adds an architectural rhythm and increases the visual gravity of your front entrance without overwhelming it. Boxwoods do not demand your attention. They offer theirs. Day after day, they hold stillness at the boundary of your space. In the language of Feng Shui, they are the keepers of composure, reminding the incoming energy, and by extension, the people entering, that this home does not operate in haste, that here the pace is measured, the values are steady, and the foundation is firm. When your external environment feels unstable, when too much seems to be moving too fast, don't just focus on rearranging your entry table or repainting your foyer. Step outside, look at your front garden. Ask yourself, what is buffering this space from the overwhelm beyond it? If the answer is nothing, then it may be time to plant presence in still form, in green armor, in gentle pairs, because sometimes fortune doesn't need an invitation. It just needs a place that knows how to hold the line. Let your boxwoods be that place. Not loud, not flashy, but profoundly grounding. That is their gift and their quiet command. Plant 3, rosemary, clarity, cleansing, and subtle protection. In the world of Feng Shui, rosemary occupies a unique role, not merely as an herb for the kitchen or a garnish for memory, but as a tool of subtle purification and invisible defense. It is one of the few plants that speaks to the sensory systems of both the body and the energy field. Its sharp, upright leaves symbolize alertness, direction, and quiet readiness, while its strong aromatic presence serves as a natural energetic barrier, filtering incoming frequencies the way a mesh filters particles from flowing water. Rosemary is ideal for placement near the front door because it doesn't just beautify the space. It clarifies it. It edits out the distractions. It creates a thin, fragrant line between the outside world's noise and the quiet sovereignty of your home. In Feng Shui, boundaries are not always walls or fences. They can be tones, textures, transitions. Rosemary performs like a protective scent threshold. When placed on either side of a front path or flanking the steps leading up to your entrance, it becomes a subtle, energetic comb, brushing away unwanted agitation, stress, or residue that may otherwise drift into your household with guests or returning family members. Its chi is alert, never aggressive. It reads energy without confronting it, like a well-trained guardian that knows when to intervene and when to simply observe. For homes that are energetically sensitive, especially those where work, healing, or deep rest occur regularly, rosemary is a first line of atmospheric refinement. It says to every incoming energy, be clear or be left outside. The vertical posture of rosemary leaves echoes disciplined thought and refined intention. It's an excellent plant for those households where the front door opens directly into the living space or office. That's because its sharp, line-like leaves naturally direct and streamline chaotic chi, gathering diffuse or scattered energy and bringing it into a focused stream. In this sense, rosemary supports not only emotional boundaries, but also mental focus. It's the plant version of a clear desk, a clean email inbox, or a well-articulated intention. That's why it pairs especially well with entrances that lead straight to a workspace or study area. It provides continuity between spatial focus and inner discipline. But rosemary is not just a purifier, it's also a symbolic protector. For centuries, it has been used across traditions for cleansing rituals, spiritual smudging, and healing balms. In Feng Shui, this historical frequency is echoed in how rosemary helps clear lingering energy, particularly energy tied to resentment, emotional confusion, or unresolved conversations. This makes it especially helpful in homes where visitors come and go often, or where family dynamics can sometimes carry unspoken tension. The plant doesn't judge, it simply processes, absorbs, clears. There are, however, a few important considerations to keep in mind. Rosemary should never be left to grow wildly. While it is a hardy, generous plant, its stems can easily become tangled, overgrown, or dry if neglected. This overgrowth traps chi instead of refining it. What begins as a clarifier becomes an energetic tangle. So regular trimming isn't just a gardening chore, it's an act of energetic hygiene. Think of it like updating your digital files or clearing your cache. The pruning isn't about control, it's about clarity. If the leaves begin to brown, or if the center of the plant becomes dry and hollow, this is not just a sign of poor care. It's an indication that the energy of your entrance has become stagnant or emotionally congested. To enhance rosemary's protective and clarifying function, a few subtle additions can make a significant difference. Wrapping a thin red string around the pot or gently at the base of the plant ties it energetically to the fire element, which activates its cleansing qi and adds warmth to its grounding signature. Fire in Feng Shui also empowers intention and awareness, perfectly complementary to rosemary's existing traits. Additionally, placing a small tiger's eye stone or obsidian crystal at the base of the pot, it strengthens the plant's ability to anchor protective frequency. These stones are known for their ability to transmute negative energy and stabilize focus, especially for households where clarity is often challenged by busy routines, digital overload, or emotional entanglement. For families with school-aged children, creatives running businesses from home, or anyone navigating heavy transitions, rosemary offers something beyond decoration. It brings invisible organization to the space. It helps maintain a field of clean, directed intention where life can be lived with less energetic interference. It doesn't just smell like clarity, it holds it. Ultimately, rosemary teaches one of the most overlooked truths in Feng Shui, that protection is not always about defense. Sometimes it's about clarity, about filtering the subtle from the loud, the aligned from the draining, the essential from the excessive. That is what rosemary does best. So next time you walk up to your front door, pause beside your rosemary, run your fingers across its needles, take in the scent, and consider this. What did it just filter out for you? What heaviness did it quietly ask to remain outside? In homes that are energetically mindful, rosemary is rarely just a herb. It is the quiet usher of balance, the greeter of clear minds, and the boundary that whispers, only peace may enter here. Plant 4, golden pothos, hanging form, gentle flow and welcoming abundance. In the refined vocabulary of Feng Shui, where every curve, leaf, and placement speaks to the unseen architecture of energy, golden pothos, especially in its trailing, hanging form, acts as a gentle but potent softener of sharp space. It is not the centerpiece, not the statement plant that demands attention. Instead, it hangs with quiet humility, cascading in waves of golden green that mimic the natural movement of water flowing across stone. That's where its power lies. In that slow, downward arc, golden pothos absorbs excess intensity from the entrance, catches rushing qi before it barrels into your threshold, and returns it to a harmonious pace that can be absorbed, not resisted. Energetically, this plant is water in vine form. It brings emotional pliancy to rigid door frames, angular steps, and stark exteriors that might otherwise deflect opportunity. In Feng Shui, one of the most common imbalances at the front of a home are the overconcentration of straight lines, hard edges, and yang momentum. A front door that opens to a sharp railing, a brick path without curves, or architectural symmetry that feels more like a fortress than a welcome can create he that arrives too fast, overpowering the space rather than nourishing it. The pothos answers that force with a different kind of intelligence, graceful descent, organic flow, and quiet welcome. Hanging this plant in porch corners or from low eaves doesn't just add texture, it builds mood. The visual softness of the leaves against a hard wall instantly shifts the room's incoming vibration, especially when placed to the left of the door from the perspective of someone walking toward your entrance. The pothos aligns with the azure dragon of traditional Feng Shui, symbolizing benevolent expansion, supportive movement, and wealth that flows through collaboration rather than competition. It becomes not only a purifier of energy, but a symbol of inclusive abundance. A house that has pothos hanging at its gate sends the message, this home flows with ease, not force. The plant's cascading habit also draws energy inward, much like the natural pull of gravity. This is ideal for homes where energy feels too dispersed and too scattered. Instead of pushing fortune out, the pothos gently draws it back. But placement must be mindful. hanging the plant too low risks dragging qi downward, especially if the vines begin to tangle, touch the ground, or obstruct the walkway. In that case, what once felt fluid begins to feel stagnant. In Feng Shui, energy that pools too low near the front door is symbolic of opportunities slipping below the surface or being hidden from sight. To prevent this, trim vines regularly and ensure the base pot hangs at a height that guides energy to the door, not away from it. Golden pothos thrives in filtered light, making it perfect for semi-covered porches or shaded entry alcoves. The combination of heart-shaped leaves and trailing growth subtly communicates emotional openness and adaptable boundaries. It says, you may enter, but only with ease. That's a message we often forget to program into our physical spaces. To enhance the plant's ability to guide energy, a hanging ornament, particularly one made of brass or another reflective metal, can be added near the base of the plant. A small wind chime, coin charm, or bell does more than catch the breeze. It reprograms the air itself. Metal in the 5-element system stimulates clarity and upward movement, preventing the downward drag that sometimes afflicts hanging plants. The sound reminds qi to rise after entering. A call upward, into purpose, into presence. If your home has a doorway that opens into a hard-edged corridor, or if the front yard is bordered by sharp fences or railings, this plant becomes especially useful. It helps counterbalance the mental rigidity such environments can create. You may notice that spaces flanked by golden pothos tend to feel softer, more emotionally absorbent. People pause, they breathe. The air feels less tense, even before stepping inside. Golden pothos also has a unique compatibility with social homes. Spaces where guests are welcomed often, where conversation flows, and where the energy of community is prized. Its presence signals emotional flexibility, making it ideal for households with children, artists, or any family navigating transition. In Feng Shui terms, it's a middle ground plant, neither too assertive nor too passive. It holds the space between safety and spontaneity. But beware the tendency to forget it. Because pothos is low maintenance, it's easy to let it become neglected. Leaves gather dust, vines trail aimlessly. That's when its energy shifts from grace to weight. Don't let this plant overstay its flow. Instead, see it as a dynamic participant in your entrance choreography. Touch it, clean it, thank it. Ultimately, golden pothos is a teacher of balance between height and softness, movement and stillness, reception and refinement. In the sacred theater of your home's entrance, where so much is said before a word is spoken, this plant holds one of the most important roles. It welcomes fortune without grabbing. It clears tension without confrontation. And in its long, loping stems, it carries the message, come in, but come in peace. Plant 5, outdoor bamboo. Noble strength, resilience, and protective flow. In the language of landscape energy, few plants speak with more quiet conviction than outdoor bamboo. Its posture, tall yet flexible, strong yet unthreatening, tells a story of a graceful endurance. It doesn't compete for space or cry for attention. Instead, it stands like a living boundary between the chaos of the outside world and the cultivated calm of your home. In Feng Shui, bamboo is not merely a good luck plant. It is a symbol of moral architecture, of energy that moves upward while flowing with what it cannot control. And when placed at the front of a house, it becomes both a shield and an invitation, a protector of peace and a mirror of resilience. Energetically, bamboo offers what few other plants can, a combination of wood's vitality and water's yielding nature. It grows quickly, but with elegance. Its hollowness represents spiritual humility, allowing qi to pass through rather than resist it. This is a rare attribute, Most dense shrubs deflect energy. Bamboo refines it, and that distinction matters immensely when planting it near the entry of your home, especially for houses located at sharp corners, T-junctions, or slopes where energy rushes fast and hot. Bamboo acts as a natural buffer, a vegetal curtain that breaks down speed and reroutes force into something digestible. Think of it as an energetic modulator, transforming what is too much into something your home can metabolize. Placement is everything. A cluster of bamboo placed along a front fence, lining a wall, or softly framing the entry path doesn't just look elegant, it creates rhythm, movement. It breaks up static or stagnant spaces, but spacing must be mindful. Planting bamboo too densely, without air, without breath, can backfire. What was meant to be flow becomes blockage. In Feng Shui, when bamboo is choked or overcrowded, it no longer filters energy. It holds it hostage. Qi cannot circulate, and instead of support, the space becomes suffocating. Always plant in odd numbers like 3, 5, or 7, numbers that, according to classical numerology, resonate with expansion, spiritual protection, and life force in motion. One of the most underrated aspects of bamboo is its role as a visual softener. Modern architecture often creates hard lines, concrete pathways, symmetrical fences, and sharp geometries, all of which generate what Feng Shui terms sha-qi, or cutting energy. Bamboo interrupts this sharpness with lines that move, not rest. Its stalks sway, its leaves flicker. This subtle animation makes the entire energy field more inviting. You may not see the difference in the structure, but you'll feel it in the tone. Homes that feel cold at the doorstep become warmer. Paths that once felt abrupt become layered, nuanced, slower. Even mail carriers tend to pause when bamboo lines the entry, unconsciously adjusting their breath before stepping onto the property. Symbolically, bamboo is often called the gentleman plant. In Chinese metaphysical texts, it's compared to the noble scholar, unshaken by storm, unwavering in ethics, always reaching upward. For the modern household, this symbolism translates into energy that is not just strong, but aligned. If your home has been weathering emotional turbulence, financial volatility, or social upheaval, outdoor bamboo becomes a spiritual ally. It says to the world, we are still here, we are still upright, and we will not break. Enhancing this plant's power doesn't require mysticism, just mindfulness. Tie it a single red ribbon at the base of the main stalk or container. Red, in Feng Shui, activates the fire element, sparking warmth and clarity while stimulating the wood element of bamboo. This symbolic union, wood fed by fire, amplifies growth that is not reckless, but inspired. Another enhancement technique involves choosing containers with motifs that carry positive associations. Dragons, long, represent strength and protection. Clouds, yun, suggest ascension and spiritual evolution. These ancient symbols, when subtly woven into design, deepen bamboo's role as more than a plant, but as a statement of your home's values. Because bamboo thrives in sun and well-drained soil, it's suited to most climates where other front yard solutions fail. It requires little fertilization, grows vertically rather than outward, and offers privacy without hostility. For those living in homes where the front door faces an oncoming street or downhill slope, bamboo can mitigate energetic spill, providing a kind of rooted resistance that helps hold prosperity in place. But more than anything, bamboo teaches us that elegance is not the absence of strength. It is strength expressed without aggression. It bends, it yields, it dances, but it doesn't fall. This is the kind of energy any entrance deserves. Whether you're building a new home, renovating an old one, or simply refreshing your front garden, Outdoor bamboo gives you more than aesthetics. It gives your home a voice, calm, grounded, alert. In the narrative of Feng Shui, the story starts before the front door. And when bamboo stands at that beginning, the story often unfolds with more grace, with more clarity, with more resilience woven into the very threshold. Because before fortune can arrive, before harmony can settle, before energy can stay, it must feel protected. And few plants protect more quietly or more powerfully than bamboo. How Tom Ford designed his entrance energy. In the world of high design, where detail is everything and visual drama is currency, Tom Ford did something unexpected when he renovated his Los Angeles residence. He didn't start with his trademark minimalist interiors or the tailoring of custom furniture finishes. He started with the one thing few homeowners give enough weight to, the entrance. Not the doorknob, not the gate, but the energy. And he chose to shape it not with architecture, but with plants. According to multiple features in Architectural Digest, Ford collaborated with a Japanese landscape designer whose approach was deeply rooted in traditional principles. One of the core philosophies behind the design was what the consultant referred to as emotional silence. It was not about creating a void, but about engineering a moment of pause, one that took place the second your feet left the driveway and touched the path toward the home. Ford's approach was as disciplined as one of his runway collections. The entry path was stripped of ornamentation, stripped of distraction. There were no oversized fountains, no branding cues, no opulent signage. Instead, two neat rows of citrus trees stood like sentinels on either side of the approach. Their branches were manicured but not rigid, their leaves open but not sprawling. The placement was intentional, each tree positioned to soften the incoming energy, to infuse scent, color, and motion into a straight line that could have felt sterile without it. At the very edge of the threshold, Ford installed a pair of perfectly pruned boxwoods. Not massive, not loud, but balanced. They flanked the entrance like punctuation marks, quietly suggesting that those who cross this line leave something behind. Rushed thoughts, overstimulated minds, cluttered intention. Guests, according to interviews and anecdotes, often commented on the strange stillness that descended the moment they passed through the first row of citrus. It wasn't something anyone could put their finger on, but those sensitive to space noticed it immediately. A deceleration, a soft recalibration of breath and posture. That's the mark of well-applied entrance feng shui, not just pretty plants, but a psychological reset. Ford didn't build a barrier, he built a filter, and the plants became the first conversation a guest had with the house, not through words, but through feeling. The citrus trees weren't randomly chosen. In feng shui, citrus holds active yang energy, bright, expansive, uplifting. Their round fruits resemble gold coins, symbolizing incoming wealth and vitality. The fragrance cleanses stagnant qi and helps shake off external heaviness. Ford's designer knew this, but he also knew that too much citrus or wild placement could overstimulate. That's where the boxwoods came in. Their presence balanced the citrus with quiet solidity. In classical energy theory, boxwoods are guardians. They don't block, but they buffer. They don't shout protection. They whisper boundaries. Placing them at the threshold, not beside the door, created a space of energetic deceleration, an invisible vestibule where movement turns into arrival. What Tom Ford created, consciously or not, was a sequence, a choreography. In feng shui, this is known as a transition ritual, not a literal one, but a spatial one. The path becomes a filter. The filter becomes a reset, and the reset becomes readiness. Readiness to enter a space that is more than rooms. It's a field, a container for identity, creativity, rest, and fortune. It doesn't matter how well decorated your living room is if the path to it leaks chaos. Ford understood this. That's why his greatest entrance luxury wasn't a sculptural archway or a marble staircase. It was the precision with which he shaped energy long before anyone saw the door. This story matters not just because it involves a famous name, but because it demonstrates how even those at the top of creative industries understand the quiet power of space. Tom Ford didn't need his guests to be impressed before they walked in. He needed them to feel welcome and held. He needed the house to say, "This is a place of clarity." And he needed his own energy after long days of designing, directing, and leading global teams to be met by a feel that filtered the world instead of amplifying it. That's the true role of front-of-house landscaping in Feng Shui. Not aesthetics, not prestige, but transition. The plants are not decor, they are energy stewards. Their leaves don't just cast shadows, they cast attentions. Their placement doesn't just frame views, it frames arrival. And if that's what someone like Tom Ford, arguably one of the most visually attuned individuals of our time, prioritizes when entering his own sanctuary, then perhaps it's time we all ask ourselves, what is our entrance saying? What's it inviting in? And more importantly, what is it quietly failing to keep out? Because before you unlock your front door, before you cross the threshold, before you greet your family or your peace or your potential, you walk a path, and the energy of that path speaks. In Ford's case, it speaks without noise. It speaks without clutter. It speaks in citrus, in boxwood, in quiet strength. And that conversation begins with a choice, a planting, a direction. That's the level of subtlety where prosperity begins, not with louder decor, but with smarter design. And the plants that live outside your home may end up defining your internal fortune more than anything money can buy. What to avoid? In the practice of Feng Shui, the entrance to your home is never just architectural. It is psychological, energetic, and deeply symbolic. This is the space that filters every interaction between the outer world and your inner world. It's the place where your home's first breath is drawn, and that breath either invites nourishment or resists it. While many people are quick to add greenery or decorative plants to make their home appear more welcoming, very few understand the energetic language these choices speak. Unfortunately, many well-meaning homeowners unknowingly sabotage the flow of prosperity, harmony, and clarity before anyone even reaches the doormat. The following are 3 common mistakes that significantly disrupt the qi at your entrance, along with the deeper implications each one carries. The first and perhaps most overlooked mistake is placing sharp or thorny plants such as cacti, agave, or needle-leaf desert plants near your doorway. While these plants may seem architecturally dramatic or low maintenance to some, Feng Shui reads them very differently. In energy terms, these plants are emissaries of sha qi, which translates to harsh, cutting, or aggressive energy. Their spines and pointed shapes do not simply sit in silence. They project. They radiate an energetic field that, whether consciously perceived or not, signals the same thing to the environment. Beware, keep out, proceed with caution. This is not the message you want the front of your home to broadcast, especially if you are seeking to attract prosperity, visitors, opportunities, or emotional ease. Imagine meeting a person for the first time whose body language was crossed arms, a furrowed brow, and a cold stare. That's the energetic equivalent of lining your entrance with cactus or other thorn-bearing plants. While it might seem subtle, energy fields are shaped before visual impressions are formed. In Feng Shui, every object has a voice. Sharp plants near your front door don't whisper support, they shout warning. If you live in a dry climate and admire the aesthetic of succulents, opt for soft-leafed varieties such as echeveria, jade plants, or paddle plants that hold the same architectural value but communicate softness, abundance, and steadiness rather than resistance. The second major mistake is allowing plants at the entrance to become overgrown, decaying, or visibly unhealthy. This includes brown or curling leaves, dry stems, tangled root balls, containers with moldy soil, and planters overrun by weeds or pests. While this might appear to be a minor landscaping issue, energetically it is profound. In Feng Shui, life force, or Qi, responds to signals of care, vitality, and attention. Dead or decaying plant material sends a very clear message to the energy of your space: stagnation, neglect, and resignation. The entrance to your home should function like the heart center of a ritual. It is the part of the space where you demonstrate how you wish to be greeted, how you intend to be supported, and what level of presence you bring to your own life. When a plant is sick or uncared for at this vital location, it symbolically tells the universe that your growth has been left unattended, your prosperity has been delayed, and your capacity for tending your space, your life, has been compromised. These cues are not metaphorical, they're magnetic. The same way a clean, vibrant, well-pruned plant magnetizes attention and joy, a dying one quietly repels it. Even if you are in a transition or rebuilding season, especially then, you must demonstrate to your space that you're willing to nurture what you wish to grow. Letting a plant wither at your door is like leaving a forgotten to-do list taped to your front gate. It's visible and spiritually heavy. If a plant is beyond saving, remove it fully and either compost it respectfully or dispose of it in a mindful way. Then replace it with something that matches your current intention: a new cycle, a fresh energy, a living symbol of your willingness to begin again. The third and perhaps most common mistake is overplanting or obstructing the natural walking path leading to your door. Many homeowners, especially those enthusiastic about gardening, have a tendency to fill space for visual impact. Large planters, hanging baskets, decorative shrubs, climbing vines. While lushness can be beautiful, it can also become blockading. In Feng Shui, the pathway to your front door is the primary river of Qi. It is how energy finds you, how luck arrives, how relationships form, and how clarity gathers before you even begin your day. When that path is congested, either with oversized pots, narrow stone walkways cluttered by side plants, or intrusive low-hanging branches, it's as if you've told opportunity to take the long way around. Imagine inviting a friend over and building a hedge maze in front of your house without a map. That's what many people do energetically without even realizing it. A path should never require negotiation. It should require only arrival. Keep walkways simple, unobstructed, and wide enough that two people can walk side by side without brushing against anything sharp or wild. Avoid narrow pathways where plants lean inward. Instead, use low symmetrical shrubs or softly trailing greenery that encourages gentle movement and breath. Remember, energy moves like a guest. It doesn't want to be pushed or forced. If it arrives and the path is unclear, it turns around. Additionally, avoid visual clutter near the base of the plants. Scattered pebbles, cracked pots, hoses left uncoiled, or ornaments that have no clear energetic purpose. These items may not block movement physically, but they block perception. And when the energy can't see the door clearly, it pauses, then redirects. A good feng shui entrance is not a garden show. It is a conversation between space and direction. It says to opportunity, "I've cleared the way for you," not "try to find me behind the foliage." Less is not always more, but clarity always is. And one final note, always choose health over volume. A single healthy rosemary bush placed with intention has more impact than 3 sprawling ones left unkempt. A pair of citrus trees in symmetry do more for your luck than an array of random flowers with no attention to form. If you can only tend 1 or 2 plants deeply and with care, begin there. Energetically, one healthy relationship with a plant is worth a dozen neglected ones. The entrance is not the place to experiment. It is the place to align. Because when your front space carries clarity, your entire house, your entire life feels it. Every moment you spend clearing that energy is not wasted. It is the planting of future momentum. So walk your entrance today, slowly, as if you were visiting your own life for the first time. What does it say? What does it hold? And more importantly, what does it need to release in order to finally let you arrive? That is where energy begins. That is where fortune finds its door. And the plants that stand there, they are your silent gatekeepers. Let them speak with grace. Let them reflect your readiness. Let them hold not just space, but your highest self in bloom. Who benefits most from this practice? In Feng Shui, there are few areas more underappreciated and more transformational than the front of the home. It is where energy first meets intention, where impressions are formed before a single word is spoken, and it is where the future often takes shape long before it crosses your threshold. This section is not just about landscaping or even about design. It's about identifying who, in particular, benefits most from aligning this threshold, this energetic filter, with clarity, purpose, and deep emotional congruence. First, let's speak to families who are rebuilding emotionally, financially, or spiritually after a difficult chapter. This could be the result of a loss, a move, a divorce, or a series of quiet setbacks that slowly wore down the harmony inside the home. These are families who may not be in crisis anymore, but still feel the residue of past overwhelm in the walls, in the mood of the mornings, in the unspoken energy that seems to weigh down their connection. For these homes, tending to the front entrance is not cosmetic, it's cathartic. It becomes a living declaration that says, we are ready for something new, and we're willing to meet it halfway. A simple act like planting a citrus tree beside the walkway, or clearing out dead brush and placing a healthy rosemary bush near the threshold, becomes more than a gesture. It becomes a ritual of reclamation, a visible, intentional signal that the chapter of stuckness, case, or heaviness is no longer welcome here. And the best part, the moment the plants begin to thrive, so too does the family's energetic coherence. The path becomes clear, not just for guests, but for grace. Now consider entrepreneurs, particularly those running businesses from home. These are individuals whose personal and professional energies live under the same roof. They answer emails in the same space where they eat dinner. They pitch clients in the same building where they tuck their children into bed. For these professionals, the front entrance is more than a boundary. It is a gatekeeper for discernment. It is the energetic separation between who they serve and who they are. When the front of a home is neglected, blurred, or confusing, the business within often reflects the same instability. Leads get lost, boundaries get blurred, creativity becomes clouded. But when the entrance is clear, intentional, and well-tended, when boxwoods stand calmly at the gate, when soft lighting guides chi gently forward, when vines are pruned with care and not left to choke the walkway, the entire home office becomes a place of better focus, better reception, and better outcomes. It's not a superstition, it's a strategy, one that works in silence with precision and with your long-term vision in mind. And then there are those in transition, the individuals who are between identities, between homes, between chapters. Maybe they've just moved and are still living out of boxes. Maybe they're starting over after a long marriage, or a long career, or a long season of invisibility. These are the people who look at their front door and see a question mark instead of a statement. And that precisely is where the opportunity lives, because the front of your house is not just a place to enter. It's a place to decide. It's where you can begin to define who you are becoming, not based on what you've survived, but based on what you're now ready to receive. The right plant placed outside the door at this moment, a young bamboo stalk that bends without breaking, or a soft golden pothos that cascades like the surrender of old identity into new alignment, is not just decoration, it is declaration. A whisper that says, this is where the next chapter begins, and it will not be written by chaos. But more than circumstance, what defines who benefits from a front of house feng shui is energy pattern. If you've been living reactively, constantly managing situations, responding to others, feeling like life is just happening to you instead of for you, then this practice is your reset. Because the entrance of your home, more than any other space, reflects whether you are living with intention or being carried by default. Every day as you walk up the path to your door, you are moving through a decision field. Are the plants reaching out to greet you, or are they choking the way forward? Is the path lit, clean, quietly dignified? Or is it cluttered, cracked, overgrown, forgotten? Are you walking into a space that reflects the future you want, or the past you haven't cleared? This is where direction is reclaimed. This is where sovereignty returns. And it doesn't require a renovation budget or a landscaping crew. It requires presence. It requires care. It requires a willingness to say, from this step forward, I choose alignment. So if your home has felt like it's holding old energy, if your days begin without clarity, or if your life feels like a series of reaction loops rather than a designed flow, start here, at the front, with a plant, with a pot, with a corner that has been waiting to be noticed. And watch what shifts, not just outside, but inside. Because in Feng Shui, fortune doesn't come only to those who chase it. It comes to those who prepare a space worthy of receiving it. In the front of your home, that's where the preparation begins. Let it speak clearly, let it speak gently, and most of all, let it speak for the you who's ready to arrive. Final, you don't need to chase luck, not if your home knows how to hold it. In Feng Shui, fortune rarely crashes through the door. It doesn't need to. It's quieter than that. It watches, it listens, and it responds to the messages your home is already sending. Messages written not in words, but in shape, in flow, in care. That's why the entrance is sacred, not because it's ornamental, but because it is the first place where the unseen meets the physical, where opportunity pauses and decides whether this is a place it wants to stay. Most people think energy begins once they cross the threshold, but the truth is fortune knocks long before that. It knocks when it sees citrus trees glowing with promise. It pauses when boxwoods stand calmly like steady sentinels. It notices when rosemary perfumes the path, when bamboo sways with nobility, when golden pothos invites softness instead of sharpness. These signals don't shout, but they don't need to. They speak clearly, and they tell a story about the kind of life that lives inside. So now I offer this reflection, not as a closing thought, but as an opening ritual. What message is your front garden or threshold sending right now? What have you been unintentionally broadcasting to your future? Through your plants, your path, your choices? And more importantly, is that message in harmony with what you're truly ready to receive? Because in the language of Feng Shui, alignment doesn't begin with effort. It begins with welcome. It begins with intention carved into soil, shaped through foliage, whispered through the breath of a plant that you chose with purpose. And that purpose doesn't need to be complicated. Sometimes all it takes is clearing a corner, pruning back what no longer fits, planting one new voice in your landscape, a voice that says, I'm ready to receive. I've made room. I've softened the path. Let my future come freely. So I invite you now to share with me, what plant stands at your entrance today? And what new one are you feeling called to invite in? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and this channel is more than content. It's a conversation, one home at a time. And if this video shifted something in you, quietly, subtly, like a breeze through leaves, please share it with someone who's planting their next chapter. Someone who may not know where to begin, but who intuitively feels that the beginning is outside the door, not inside of it. Subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We're approaching 2,000 subscribers, and each of you helps us grow. Not with noise, not with hype, but with presence, with care, with the steady cultivation of homes that are not just well-designed, but deeply aligned. Because when your entrance is clear, your future doesn't have to search for you. It will know exactly where to arrive.